Good afternoon. I'm glad you guys are here. I want to introduce us just briefly, and then we're going to do a little poll. So our presentation, to bot or not to bot, we're talking about original student writing, and we are 3 English professors. So that is perspective we're coming from. We have William Shakespeare behind us, supporting us today. And I'm Melanie Paden. I'm a communications faculty member at St. Petersburg College, and I mostly teach English as a second language.
I'm Susan Benson. I also teach communications at St. Petersburg College, and I also mostly teach English as a second language.
I'm Joyce, and I am also communications professor at SPC, but I teach all composition classes. You name it, Comp 1, Comp 2, World Lit, yeah, all of the above.
Yeah, so I want to start with a little, how do I make it go to the next one? No, I got it. I had turned it on. You can use your phone to complete this little Mentimeter. It's a little survey, so I'm just going to give you a few minutes, just a few questions. Okay, here we go. What kind of assignments can assess authentic student learning? You guys answered 16 of you proctored tests, midterms, and finals. Some said at-home work and essays. 10 of you said proctored writing. So later when I have a hot take about proctored writing, I want to hear from my 10 people. 15 of you said, I don't even know anymore, and 19 said other. Very interesting. So I asked all of you, how do you get students to think and write for themselves? And you put some answers up there. Proctoring and in class, conversations, reflection assignments, convince them their voice is important, get them to experience real life. Well, I wonder how you do that. Encourage and have open dialogue, put them in a cave and they have to write their way out. Who are you? You sound cruel, but I like it. So there's a lot of different ideas here, and I'm interested to hear from you. How many of you actually teach English? Does anybody teach writing English? Okay, I have not found you at this conference, but here you are. Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see you guys. We need to get together. And somehow I missed my first 2 questions, so I'm going to go back to them. I don't know why it wasn't showing. The first question, how many students are using AI? 19 of you said all of them, 18 of you said some of them, and 0 of you have your head in the sand. So congratulations. I actually have a lot of data about, I don't know if you saw the copy leak study that they did back, they released it I think in November, where it said 90% of students openly say that they're using AI regularly for their assignments, and many of those are using it daily. And it's only increasing, it's not going down. I know I'm preaching to the choir here about that. How much AI-generated content do you want from your students? 3 of you said 0. Good luck. 30 of you said within reason. 30 of you, and only 3 said any AI use is fine. Very interesting. Okay, good. So with that in mind, let me see if I can actually get our PowerPoint to come back up. Okay, so I have a question for you. How many drivers do you think are going to obey this speed limit? Yeah, and I think that's what we're doing, especially in writing classes, when we say to students, hey, you can use AI, but not too much. It's like telling them you can only go 25 miles per hour on this road. It's a ridiculous request. And I know, again, all of us here are here because we know that it is important to incorporate AI into our pedagogy and to understand how students need those boundaries. And so the 3 of us are going to talk today about different ways that we set those reasonable boundaries so that students can feel comfortable and know where they're at, and they know, we're not telling them go 25 on a desert road. We're telling them something reasonable that makes sense to them. So Dawn is going to talk about AI for idea generation. Susan's going to share process over product, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about proctoring as performance.
All right. So as I said, I'm a composition instructor. So are my students using AI? Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I do not think for 1 second they don't, but I also don't encourage them not to use it. In fact, using things like, and of course, ChatGPT, everybody probably knows what that is, right? But that's a great way to generate research topic ideas. So I do encourage my students to use some of those tools. they're using it, they're needing to use it out in the job force. So by explaining to them how to use it, and then the other thing I do, and this is it's my favorite thing to do, especially when we're writing an essay. I'll say, okay, guys, give me a topic, somebody, just any topic. And they'll give me a topic, and I will literally do ChatGPT. I'll write the paper in front of them. I will put in and say, please use, or I don't say please to AI. I'm like, give me a works cited in MLA format, and so many citations, per paragraph. And when I do that, they're like, oh, look at that, it's right there. And I'm like, it's good, right? It's really good. And then what I do is I copy and paste one of the citations into something else, and it doesn't exist or it's not correct. And then I go, what do you think I'm going to do first when I'm looking at your paper? I'm going to do that. I'm going to see if your citations are correct. So that kind of puts things in perspective. So I really kind of push the ethical part of it. I'm like, AI is not a bad thing. It's not something that we don't want to use. It's something we want to use ethically. And if you were at one of our colleagues' panels earlier today, he was discussing the ethics that are involved with AI. So I think and again, they're not going to obey the speed limit. They do want to go in and write an entire paper using ChatGPT. But then I also give them another scenario. What about this? You're getting ready to have surgery, and the surgeon used ChatGPT or AI all the way through medical school, but he's about to cut you open, or she, or they. How do you feel about that? Are you okay? They haven't really done the material. They haven't really studied it. Are you okay to have surgery with them? And oftentimes they kind of do the look like, I said, well, same kind of thing here. I said, you have to think about how you're using it and use it ethically. So one of the, I'll just show you. One of my favorite tools, besides ChatGPT, is Goblin Tools. And Goblin Tools has something called the Professor. There are lots of different, and if we had more time, I'd go into it with you guys, but this is a great tool for them to start understanding a topic a little bit more. It explains it in detail. It gives them real life examples, real life scenarios of how to use it. And then VoicePal, this one actively helps kind of refine the ideas. Because one of the things with students and when you're teaching them writing is you have to get them to learn how to narrow the topic. And that's a really hard concept to learn. But that's one of the things that these AI tools can help them do, is to refine those topics. But again, it's not encouraging them not to use ChatGPT or Goblin Tools or VoicePal and all the others out there, but how to use it responsibly. And I think that's, that for me is what works best. And I'm not really seeing a ton of AI written papers in my courses. Now that doesn't mean that doesn't happen, but I'm not seeing a lot of it because I think I do really push that idea that, saying it's evil isn't going to help either, because they do need to know what it is. They are going to use it, maybe not in my class all the time, but in the workforce and in other classes. So introducing it to, and this is in particular with a Comp 1 class that I really kind of push them. In fact, we're working on a persuasive essay right now in one of my classes, and that's exactly what they're doing, is learning about some of these AI tools. So you guys have a little homework to do, well, classwork. So here are some example scenarios. A student submits an essay clearly generated by AI. Students rely on AI instead of developing their skills. AI produces biased or inaccurate information. So what I want you guys to do really quick, just choose one of those scenarios, take 2 minutes to do it, identify the problem, and propose a policy or a solution to one of those scenarios. Did anyone choose one? Christian?
I think the answer possibly to all three of them is to talk to the student.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's first and foremost.
Easier said than done, because as we all have hundreds of students. Yes. But being able to have the beginning of saying what is unacceptable, and then if something happens, to have active conversations with them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else have a solution? Yes.
And I would actually like to hear your opinion on this as well. So one of the things AI can't do is at the page number or the paragraph number where the research comes from. So I proactively ask my students and let them know we're going to do APA 7, but we're going to use as if everything were a quote, all of your resources. That's the expectation. It helps me go, hey, I can easily look it up, and then of course they have to have active links in the bibliography. And, you know, the students who don't do that, they're clearly, you know, you get the DOI link to the 404.
Right.
And then have a conversation like Christian said when that comes up.
Right.
About it. I'm just curious.
I like that. That's great.
Your opinion.
I think that's a great idea. So, and I think that would be very helpful. Anything we can do to, you know, again, not discourage, but encourage ethically. And I keep saying the word ethically because that to me is super important.
And I find that it helps the students understand that, you know, it's like in the real world, because when I do talk to them, like, you know what, your boss is going to ask where your data came from. You know, and you don't want to be tripping over your lip
No, that's
on the job.
right.
And so it also opens up kind of a workplace conversations.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love it. Anybody else want to share something?
So I also want your opinion on this as my mind is working. So after this week, I'm pretty much convinced that my asynchronous summer class, I know they're already using AI, so I just as well run the floodgates and try to implement it as a tool. From a writing perspective, it's a class where they create a business plan, and that's like the final deliverable for the course. If they're utilizing AI to do that, which I think is probably where I'm headed, what would it look like to have them submit their own rough draft and make them go through and annotate that assignment? Okay, this is good that I need to add to this area. Well, AI came up with this data. This doesn't make sense because X, Y, Z. What do you think of that? Is there ways you would?
I love that. Well, first of all, and I should have started with this, I have my students do rough drafts in Comp 1 for every single one of their essays. And yes, it's time consuming and all that good stuff, but I'm able to kind of nip it right there and go, hold on a second. And if I'm not sure if they know what something means, I will actually pull them aside and say, hey, talk to me. I didn't know, you know, what does this mean kind of thing. And sometimes I will have them do, you know, a rough draft in class right there with me. And that way I can, you know, they can ask questions. So I think that's good. So yeah, anything else? All right, I'm going to hand it over to my, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To kind of go back onto what she was talking about with the business plan is you can have them critique what AI provides as the business plan.
That's a good one, too.
The fundamentals that you use in that class and have them make improvements based on what it gives as a starting point.
AI can also critique itself though. So what you really want is for them to engage at some point. You know, you do have to be creative. So, you know, maybe annotating by hand or doing a video, you know.
Yeah, video critique, something
Because
like
they
that.
can just feed it back. You know, you can say to AI, okay, critique what you just wrote.
Yeah.
And it will. So I love the annotation idea. And
Yeah.
I think Susan's going to talk about that a little bit with annotating and reading and highlighting and, you know.
And with that said, Susan,
How do I go to the next slide?
I just did for you. And then,
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So my population is a little bit different than Dawn's. My students, English is their second language, and all of them already speak English very, very well. They're with me because they need to refine their writing skills and their reading skills before they matriculate into regular courses. And for language acquisition, it's really important to make mistakes. And so for my students, I'm really not allowing them to use AI. So if they want to use AI at home as a learning tool, and I know there's a lot of tools out there for ESL learners, and that's great. But as far as my class, when they're writing, I don't want them to use AI at this point. Because if they outsource their writing to a bot, it could actually cause a problem for their language development. There's a ton of research that shows that feedback on writing and making mistakes is a critical part of language acquisition. So I encourage my students to do their own writing because they need to make those mistakes so that they can get feedback, and then they notice the feedback, and then when you notice that you're making the same mistake over and over again, that's how you acquire that linguistic element. So we don't have a whole lot of time. I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but part of what I do is I try to make a safe place for my students to feel like they can make those mistakes. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Did I skip one? Okay. The other thing is, if we're outsourcing everything to a bot, it could reduce our students' ability to think critically. And I think this is really important. So Christian sent me this study, and this is a pretty big study showing that if we use AI all the time for our writing and for our thinking, it could definitely change our ability to think critically. So I'm just going to go to this one last study. This one's been all over the news. This is the MIT study, and it's a very small in size, but I like this figure right here, because what this is in red, those are the students that did all of their writing with ChatGPT. And that shows that they cannot remember anything that was in their essay, basically. So the students that either used research or their brain only could remember a lot more, that's the green and the blue, than the students who wrote their entire essay using ChatGPT. They couldn't recall pretty much anything that was in their essay. So we have to have those boundaries again, right? Those guardrails that we were talking about earlier today. All right. So what I've been doing with my students, one of the units we start with is about AI. So we read 4 or 5 articles about AI, articles in favor, articles against, and so I'm always looking for essays about AI. And I found this one, it was Megan O'Rourke, she's a professor at Yale and also a poet, and this was in the New York Times opinion section, and this was one of the quotes she used at the end, or I'm sorry, I'm quoting her at the end of her essay. She took a deep dive and started using ChatGPT for her own writing and kind of explored, what it could do for her and how it could help her in her daily tasks. And at the end of it all, she kind of came back to this idea that the process is really important, right? When we're writing, it's painful sometimes when we're writing, right? We make errors, we make mistakes, we change our mind, we change what we want to say, we go back to it again and again. That's what the writing process is all about. It's about grappling with it and coming up with those exact, before we get to that final product. And I think that's something that's worth trying to preserve. So I'm focusing on process now in my classes. I've always focused on the process, but now I'm making it central. It is the most important thing that my students do. The final draft is worth almost nothing in my class. So each step of the process is going to get a much higher grade than the actual final draft. The final draft, they've worked really hard to get there, but it's all the work that they've done in between that matters to me. So, for example, we read 4 or 5 articles on AI. We analyze those articles, we make annotations, we highlight. They might have some work to do at home with those articles after we've read them in class, then they might go home, reread them, answer some questions. So my classes, by the way, are hybrid or blended. So part of it's face-to-face, part of it's at home. But anything they're doing at home is basically a participation grade, because as Melanie was saying, AI can do pretty much everything. So if I was asking them to do written comprehension questions at home, I was getting AI. And I don't need any AI detection to tell me this, because my students, English is their second language, and I've seen their writing in class, and when at home all of a sudden they're writing something that's, publishable, the vocabulary and the syntax is better than my own, then I can tell, right? I don't need copy leaks to tell me. Anyway, we spend a lot of time reading about a topic, right? Because you have to know something before you can write. And then we get to the point where we just kind of write a thesis in class, and they think about what they want to say about the topic. And then I send them back home again with the research that they have and their articles, and they reread and they highlight and they annotate. And you can see here, this is just in Canvas, a video submission. All they're doing is showing me that they've read, they've highlighted, they've thought about it. Then they come, it's really the flipped classroom, right? So this is what they do before they come to class. Then they come back to class, and in class, they're outlining and drafting in class. And we're using some tools to make sure that what they're doing in class is actually their own work. And that's what Melanie's going to talk to you about next. All right, take it away, Melanie.
What a segue. Thank you. Yeah, so I have a little bit of a hot take about proctoring. I want you to imagine a proctoring scenario. What do you imagine the students look like when they're in a proctoring scenario?
In their bedroom.
That's true. If it's online. I have also taught it online with proctoring. No, actually, I have. If you ever watch the proctoring video, sometimes you get the ones who are just like cursing at it the whole time. Have you ever gotten it? Like this. Because it's not working right or whatever. No, but we have blended classes. So right now I have the luxury of having some in-class assignments. What I do is I still use Lockdown Browser in the classroom. And I am telling you, the students relax. Because the way that I do it, and how many of you are using Canvas? Are you using Canvas? Are you in Canvas? Okay, great. I thought it would be a lot of people. So in Canvas, I use a quiz for my drafting and my writing. Because I can have multiple attempts on every draft, on every quiz, and so they'll write one day. And by the way, the proctored writing environment is not like you're not like you're taking the bar exam. You're not sitting there silently, and the person next to you is dying because they're so sick because they're so nervous. In this environment, the students it's a workshop day. So why do I use Lockdown Browser if I want it to be a workshop day? Because then they can just relax. They don't need to be like, oh, I just want to click Google, they don't. I just want to open ChatGPT. They can just relax. And it kind of makes me think like, do you have the feeling when you come to a hotel and you can actually get like more work done sometimes because you don't have like your dog and your family? And it's like, those people support me, but now here, I just got it would take me 3 hours to grade, and I got it done in an hour because I was sitting in a hotel room. Why is that? Reduced distraction, And so I just feel once they understand that I am doing this proctored environment, not to catch them, it's to release them, And so I really feel like a lot of people, when they're talking up here, they're saying like, oh, are you still doing proctoring? Ugh, Luddite, And I'm like, no, the proctoring is me valuing their work. And when they feel that, like I'm not separating the relationship with them. I'm building trust with them the whole semester. I say, yeah, we use this Lockdown Browser thing. It just means you can't open links unless I put the link in there. And by the way, do you want them to use one link? Just put it in your quiz. Maybe you already know that. But in a Canvas quiz with Lockdown Browser, if you give them a link, now they can open that link, but not any other links. And so if they're doing research about one article, okay, it's just about that article, But no, you can't go to Google Translate. You can't go to ChatGPT. You can't use those tools. So this is how you do that. And this is an example of what it might look like. It's just a quiz question. I let them do one attempt. Then I give them feedback. I don't give them grade. I just give them feedback. And then on the second attempt, when they go back in, they see the work they've already done. They can see my feedback. And then they can work on the next iteration of that draft. They just keep going. So I've also done this in OneDrive or Google Drive, where you have a document and they can just keep working in that document. But again, the benefit here is it's right there in Canvas. I can associate a rubric with it, and it's in Lockdown Browser. Whereas in a Google Drive, you don't have that opportunity. So I think it's a really cool thing. If you want more information about it, let me know. I can tell you how to do it. And then my last slide, I'm inspired by Bad Bunny. Okay, I saw the Super Bowl halftime show, and I was just like, this man is amazing. His performance was great. He was so comfortable in his skin. That's what I want my students to feel when they come into a proctored environment with me. I don't want them coming in there sick with nerves, And so I think that we don't, however you do proctoring, whatever you want to call it, whether it's a presentation, it's a performance, it's an improv like they talked about in the last session, whatever it is where they are really showing their skills, that performance is their chance to show what they're doing. It's their chance, and it's showing I value that, So it's motivating in that way. And I've done a lot of research about student motivation, about human motivation, thinking about this and how having that social situation where you show your skills is what drives us. How many of you did a presentation at this conference and now you know more about your thing than you did before. You know way more because you came here and you came to present it to your colleagues. And that's what we want to give our students the opportunity to do. It sets a clear boundary so they can relax. It can be lower stress if you make it that way. It can be a culmination of work, like Professor Benson talked about, how it's a culmination of things they've done at home, and it can be a work in progress. It doesn't have to be a one and done. Thank you very much. We'd love to talk to you more, but we don't have time.